Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 3M Open Initial Research Show. Hope you had a fantastic weekend with the Open Championship and the Barracuda. Hopefully you played all of the Xander, all of the Russell Henley that I mentioned, the Adam Scott that I mentioned. You avoided all of the chalk that seemed to be going around with the Tony Finau, the Tommy Fleetwood, the Tyrrell Hatton, the Rory. I was guilty of playing most of those players, so no worries if you weren't able to avoid them. But for yours truly, it was another pretty solid week. Although we didn't have the outright at either tournament, I didn't have Xander and the Barracuda. I still believe is technically going on, but Nick Dunlap, I believe, is going to win that. Didn't have either outright, but it was quite a sweaty Sunday. Had a Russell Henley outright that looked really, really good, and he played very, very well Sunday. Xander just beat him. I had the top 20 on Shubhankar Sharma. So hopefully you tailed that play a little bit for the Open. And then for the Barracuda, I had a lot of Mac Meisner. I had a lot of Rico Hoey, who kind of backed up today. Chan Kim, Taylor Pendrith, Ben Silverman. It was another very, very good week. Not as great as last week, obviously, without the outright hit. But another fantastic week. That is two solid weeks in a row. One fantastic and one solid. So we're going to try to keep the momentum as we come back stateside and look forward to the penultimate event on the PGA Tour for the regular season, that is, and the 3M Open. So let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where usually I will post some research around each tournament of the week. So obviously for the 3M this week, that'll come out tomorrow. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. You would have seen the top 20 on Shubhankar Sharma. You would have seen the outright on Russell Henley. You would have seen the outrights for the Barracuda with Rico Hoey, Chan Kim, and some others. You would have seen all of the Adam Scott that I played, all of the Russell Henley that I played. And, of course, you would have seen some of the not-so-good plays as well, like Aaron Ryan and whatnot. But if you want to see the weekly betting card and the players that I'm most using in the DFS contests that week, give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. Can't recommend it enough to you all. He continues to update you with his own version of recent form and course history. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk over there. We talk about game theory, players that we're nervously fading, any wave advantages that we see. It's always a very fun, interactive discussion over there. I highly suggest you go subscribe to his article. It is free to do, by the way, and show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. How was your Open? How was the Barracuda? Did you have Xander in the outright? Did you play a bunch of Xander? Did you avoid Rory and all of the other chalk that didn't make it, the Tommy Fleetwoods, the Tyrrell Hattons? What was your best play for the week? What's your takeaway from Royal Troon this week? And then moving forward for the 3M, who is your early pick? How much do you know of the course? Would love to hear from you all in the community, so make sure to jump in chat or in the comments. But let's turn our attention to the 3M and let's do our initial research for the 2024 3M Open. And we start, as we always do, on a Sunday night when applicable, because we haven't been able to do it the past couple of weeks. Pardon me as I clean off these glasses. We're going to start at the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. We are in Blaine, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul, Minneapolis-St. Paul area. We are in Blaine, Minnesota for the 3M Open, which is held at TPC Twin Cities. Let me zoom in here for you all. The architect of TPC Twin Cities is none other than Arnold Palmer. He did have Tom Lehman as a consultant for the course, but credit goes to Arnold Palmer for being the architect. Opened in 2000. It did go through a renovation in 2018, which 2019 is the first year that the 3M Open was held on the PGA Tour. So once TPC Twin Cities knew they were going to be hosting a PGA Tour event, Steve Winslow came in, redid some tee boxes, lengthened it a little bit. So there's a little bit of background information on TPC Twin Cities. It is an Arnold Palmer design, so no course architect filter, at least in Fantasy National. But Arnold Palmer does have a few designs and few courses around that you could definitely look at. Obviously, the biggest one being Bay Hill. TPC Twin Cities is a pretty long par 71, measuring 7,431 yards by the official scorecard. It will not play that long, as even though the course is relatively flat, it is about 1,000 feet above sea level. So nothing to the level of Old Greenwood this past week at the Barracuda that sat 6,000 feet above sea level. But this course is at elevation, so ball will travel a little bit further here. The course just doesn't play that long as the listed yardage. So a fairly long par 71, but doesn't necessarily play to its yardage. The stimp meter is 12.5. These are very fast greens. Not quite lightning. In fact, I'm going to cheat, move around. So in the past couple of years, they've had a few lightning rounds. But 12.5 is probably right on the border of fast and lightning. And these are bent greens, pure bent. It does not give a subtype of bent. Doesn't say Dominator or L93 or what was the Colonial 007 James Bond bent. So no subtype, but these are pure bent greens. The greens are large, 6,500 square feet. Of course, the PGA Tour average is about 6,000. So 6,500 square feet of greens on average. So large greens. But with this being in Minnesota, the one thing you should probably think about is water. Lots of water in play at TPC Twin Cities. 27 water hazards on the course, but come into play on 15 of the 18 holes. The fairways, even though there's only 28 acres of fairway, these fairways are fairly wide. They are fairly forgiving in that regard. About 31 yards on average at 300, 31 yards wide at 300 yards long on average here at TPC Twin Cities. 72 bunkers, about average for a PGA Tour course. Of course, we talked about the greens. The fairways are bent as well, and the rough is a bluegrass and fescue mix, kind of similar to TPC River Highlands, but not as gnarly, I guess is probably the word I would use. It is kept 4 inches long, but they don't let it grow out like they do at TPC River Highlands. If you're well offline, you can find some really nasty lies there. But this is pretty well maintained at 4 inches long. So long, but not nothing waist high, as you can see at some other places. A few notes here that they had to redo some bunkers due to a very, very wet spring. New tees on a few of these holes. Didn't necessarily add length. It just gave them more options. There are a few dog legs around TPC Twin Cities that really accentuate the water on a hole. And so more tees kind of make for more exciting hole layouts and such. So did not lengthen the tee, or lengthen the course, I should say. So there's a look at TBC Twin Cities in the 3M Open from a GCSA tournament fact sheet standpoint. Again, Arnold Palmer design, fairly large greens, long course but won't play to its length since it does sit above sea level. Large bent greens, lots of water in play. Lots and lots of water in play. So with that, we will move to Fantasy National and the players in the field this week. So far, there have been 2 players that have withdrawn. They have decided not to play from coming over from Scotland, or at least Mark Hubbard was at the Barracuda. Aaron Ryan and Mark Hubbard are not in the field. They initially committed to playing, have since withdrawn or dropped out. So those 2 players have withdrawn. Otherwise, due to its position on the calendar or its location on the calendar, does not generally draw the strongest fields. Tony Finau is here, Keith Mitchell, Batia, Keegan Bradley. So you've got a few big names, but generally this has been, kind of right in the middle or maybe even slightly less than average strength of field, just due to the fact that, the Open Championship was this past week. A lot of players aren't necessarily rushing back over after a grueling test such as the Open Championship. Let's take a look here at. We could maybe look at long courses. I don't think it's probably the best. But before we go into the course breakdown and whatnot, we can just take a quick casual look. Since the raw yardage is over 7,400 yards, although I will emphasize it does not play that long. So on courses that have been over 7,400 yards in the past couple of years, our top performers have been Sam Stevens, Akshay Bhatia, Michael Kim, Eric Barnes, Wesley Bryan, Seth Tagala, Keegan Bradley, Hayden Springer, Henrik Norlander, and Matt Kuchar. A few big names here, but generally lacking in top quality strength of field, kind of top to bottom, if you will. But speaking of the course breakdown, let's move to that in Fantasy National. Again, TBC Twin Cities has been seen for 5 years. It saw PGA Tour play starting in 2019. It did used to host a PGA Tour Champions event, so it's been seen for a few years now, but we have 5 years of data for the PGA Tour, and the length of the course comes in the par 5s. All 3 of these par 5s are over 590 yards, 594, 593, and 596. So very long par 5s, but gettable, very gettable. Par 5 6, 2.5% eagle rate. The par 5 12th, almost a 3% eagle rate. Par 5 18th, almost a 3% eagle rate. So low scores will happen here at TPC Twin Cities, despite the amount of water in play. Now, don't kid yourself. There are some very difficult holes around TPC Twin Cities. The par 4 second plays to 0.2 of a shot over par. Par 4 ninth, 502 yard par 4 ninth, plays to 1/4 of a shot over par. So there will be bogeys and even double bogeys coming onto the scorecard as well. But for the most part, it is fairly easy. You got 1500s, 1400s, 1200s on these shorter par 4s. The par 5s play, about 1/3 of a shot under par, half a shot under par. So there's a lot of good scoring opportunities around TPC Twin Cities. We move to strokes gained by shot type for top 10s, 5s, and winners. The 2 main shot types, as you would think. But look at the emphasis in off the tee compared to around the green, which is giving TPC Twin Cities the ball striking kind of feel to it. Top 5s, the irons then the putting, the off the tee is still quite distant from the around the green. And then for our winners, you would think putting would skyrocket. It's actually the irons. Now, the around the green is catching up a little bit to the off the tee. My guess is this would probably be for, the par fives. The players going for the par fives and 2 would be my guess, or the winners are salvaging their pars, being able to get up and down. But it's pretty consistent for the top fives and the top fives and the top tens, that it is the iron play. It's the off the tee. It's the ball striking. Hey, good evening, Derek. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully you had a good week and weekend for the Open and the Barracuda. Hopefully you followed a few of my plays. Unlike you all, I'm sorry to hear that. I did. I had a good Open. I can't even say that. It was a strong Open Championship. It could have been a whole lot better. I had an outright on Russell Henley that, all intents and purposes, you told me this morning that he's going to go out and shoot -2 on Sunday and post a -5. I'd have thought that was probably going to be pretty close to winning. Credit to Xander. He just won. Henley didn't lose. Scheffler didn't lose. Xander just beat him. So my Open Championship could have been year-making, really, if Russell Henley would have came through with that outright. But still, in DFS, I had 50% Russell Henley at 7% owned. I had 50% Adam Scott, who was, in the top 10. I played a lot of Xander. Shabunka Sharma. I had the top 20 on Shabunka Sharma. Not as exciting, obviously, as an outright, but, that was the mad scientist play of the week, and he ends up top 20ing. So it was a very strong Open Championship. Not as strong as the Scottish, because I had the Robert McIntyre or the Bobby Mack outright and all that. But DFS wise for the Open was quite strong. And then the Barracuda had a lot of potential today, and I think my players backed up, because I stopped watching about now, I guess, an hour ago, getting prepared for the show tonight, and I don't think my guys were performing well on Sunday. But it was a good week. It's two very good weeks in a row. The Scottish, the Open, even the ISCO for me was fantastic. So we're going to try to keep the momentum this week and trying to close out the PGA Tour regular season on a high note. So good to see you, Barbarian. I saw you in there, but I was kind of on a roll. So you were right. I did not change my lineup and cash the Open. Well, good. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it, Barbarian. Generally speaking, I always recommend to stick with your gut instinct. And you just stomach when you're right and be glad when you're stomach when you're wrong. Just be glad when you're right. Look, I'm thankful that you come here and get some information, and I try to give you some good recommendations and whatnot. But there are times where, like I said, I played plenty of Tommy Fleetwood. I played a lot of Rory this week as well. So not every one of my suggestions are going to turn out well. And ultimately, and the whole reason I say to stick with your gut instinct, ultimately the final decision's in your hands. And you're the one that's going to have to, look in the mirror and be comfortable with what you submitted in terms of a lineup and wagers. So I'm glad to hear that you had a strong week, Barbarian. But thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. We're going to try to keep the momentum. Glad you did well. Took your advice. Had Adam Scott and Henley, but Ryan Finau with them. Yeah, I had. I talked about Tommy Fleetwood and Rory. I had a lot of Aaron Rai, who made the cut and then just kind of fell apart over the weekend. So, yeah, I mean, it was a weird Open Championship. It really was. All of the chalk seemingly missed the cut, or a lot of the chalk missed the cut with the Rory and the Hat and the Fleetwood, Finau. There was a lot of Louis, which, me personally, I wasn't on, but Louis. So, it was a weird Open Championship, but I was, I just hope that you all followed on the Russell Henley, on the Shabunka Sharma, and those plays, and then limit the Rory and the Tommy of the weeks. But I appreciate the compliment, Bro Barian. I really do. I'm glad you're able to take something week in and week out from the shows. But we turn our attention. Let's see. The weather switched on day 2, caused a huge wave advantage. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was even Wednesday night. 2 to 3 hours before the tournament started. We look at wind. That's why we look at Wind Finder. I mean, even that didn't portray or predict what was going to happen. So just a lot of times it's luck. Lowry, though, yeah, I would have thought those Saturday conditions would have been conducive for him, and he struggled. He did. He just kind of struggled. Came back and played well today, but take nothing away from Xander. He was just solid, and then closed it out. But yeah, we'll let's turn our attention back to the 3M this week. You can see for the winners, it's all about the ball striking. It really is. Iron play, and then for our top 5s and our top 10s, we're going to be looking at some off the tee, and still some ball striking, maybe a little bit of putting, but don't overlook the amount of the iron play here, especially with all the water in play. We're going to be emphasizing the ball striking quite a bit this week. Again, we move to strokes gained by hole by par for TPC Twin Cities and the 3M over the past 5 years. As you would expect, the par 5s are where the professionals are doing their most damage. You see the strokes gained there for the top 10s. Top 5s are really skyrockets. The par 3s really lag behind. And then for the winners, they are playing the par 4s extremely well. I mean, they're playing all 3 of them well, but consistently the par 3s are lagging behind in terms of top 10s, top 5s, and winners. So interesting to note that. Another course where it seems that par 3s are a little bit mitigated. We move to hole composition here at TPC Twin Cities. The par 3s, they're pretty all similar in length, around the 200-yard mark. We've got one under 200, one over 225, and then 2 kind of right at 200. You got 202, and you have 204. So you can see those 2 holes could conceivably come into the 175 to 200 bucket fairly easily. So when we go to Microsoft Excel tomorrow in the data dive, it'll be interesting to see if there's a particular range that might be emphasized. We move to par 4s, 2 short par 4s, not drivable, I don't believe. 381 and 379. Again, I don't think they're drivable. The exact course layout, just full transparency, is escaping me. Some courses I visualize and memorize a little bit better than others. 3M I'm not remembering a whole lot about. Don't think they're drivable. Some short par 4s, few longer ones as well. We do have 2 long par 4s above 500 yards, so a good mix here. A good mix of short and long par 4s like we had at Troon last week. And then all 3 par 5s, it says, fall between 550 and 600. They fall between 590 and 600. I highlighted this when we came here in this page view right off the bat. 596, 593, and 594. So all of them in the same exact range, essentially. So again, it'll be interesting to see if any of these play over 600 and how much they factor in, considering that the par 5s are where the professionals are doing their most damage. We're going to probably want to focus on the 550 to 600 par 5s. Looking at approach shot distribution, 45% of the approach shots, more like 44 with some rounding, come in the 175 plus. Again, this is just the emphasis of attacking these par 5s and 2, and do have a few longer par 4s. So players are going to have to probably be pretty good with their long irons around TPC Twin Cities. 3.5% more 175 to 200 approach shots than the average tour event here at TPC Twin Cities. Look at the cut line. It did get all the way up to +2 2 years ago when the wind was howling pretty hard that week. But most of the time, it's been -1, -2 in its first year. Got all the way down to -3 last year. This is certainly on the easier end. Definitely on the easier end of average. Now, with the wind, the course can get pretty tough just with all the water in play as well. And we see that here. But generally, you should think of easy. Maybe not birdie fest. Nothing like TPC Craig Ranch or TPC River Highlands, for example. But definitely easy. And this is highlighted over here in the scoring distribution. 21.5% birdies, 13% bogeys, a few doubles just because of all the water in play. But even if you stack the scores, bogeys and doubles on top of each other, they're not going to equal the birdies. So more scores under par than over par here. Accuracy, higher here. Some players might choose to be a little bit more prudent off the tee, but the fairways are pretty forgiving. They are fairly wide. So accuracy here is a little bit higher than the tour average. Greens are much easier to hit here than the tour average. These greens, there's not a lot of complexity to them. What you see is what you get. There's not a lot of slopes, not a lot of undulation. They're just kind of fast once you're on them. They're just protected by the bunkers and the water. So as long as professionals are hitting their numbers, hitting their shots, these greens are pretty easy to hit. However, scrambling here is quite difficult due to all of the water and all the reloads. It's not necessarily that the chipping is hard or difficult. It's just that with all the water in play, reloads are going to happen. 3 putts per round, even less than the average tour event. Even with lightning greens, fast or lightning speed greens, and big greens, you see 3 putts not happening a lot here. These greens aren't complicated. Distance is quite a bit higher here. Even with all of the water in play, most players aren't afraid to hit driver. They just aren't. This is a pretty easy course off the tee, so long as you're not me and missing it by thousands of yards. So fairways and distance higher here than the average tour event. And then you see the proximity pretty much right at tour average, and that can be explained by 1, the big greens, and 2, a lot of longer irons into these greens. So there's a look at the at TPC Twin Cities in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. We will come back to the players in the field this week. Actually, before we do that, let's go to historic conditions here really quickly. You see, last year had a couple of rounds of easy, couple of rounds of average. We did start getting some lightning speed greens last year. 2022, when the cut was at +2, you see it was windy. It was quite windy throughout the majority of the week. But even the first 2 rounds, gosh dang it, I didn't mean to do that. The first 2 rounds both played difficult. So if the winds are, high this week, that is something to think about. But generally speaking, we're looking at easy to average, especially the first couple of years. It was easy to average. And then the winds have really kind of picked up. You see, the first year was calm. Last year it was calm except for the first day. And that's when it's generally playing easy. So we'll have to see starting tomorrow what the weather looks like. Because if the winds are picked up and pretty high, this course can get difficult. So without that knowledge, or we'll start looking at that tomorrow. We're not going to look at any big picture view filters. We took a casual look at long courses. But if you missed why I don't like that filter this week, make sure you recheck the show. But the TLDR of it is the course won't play to its yardage because it sits a little bit above sea level. Not to the extent of the Barracuda this past week, but does sit 1,000 feet above sea level, so the ball will travel a little bit. So instead, let's just take a look at some strokes gained data. We're going to emphasize the 2 ball striking categories. So in the past 24 rounds, so long as it's been within 3 months or roughly since the Masters, your top off-the-tee players in the field this week: Luke Clanton, Kevin Doherty, Keith Mitchell, Johnny Vegas, Patrick Fishburne, Akshay Bhatia, Rico Hoey, Cam Champ, Alejandro Tosti, and Sam Stevens. Your top iron players in that time frame: Tony Finau, Kevin Yu, Keith Mitchell, David Lipsky, Chan Kim, Ben Griffin, Troy Merritt, Tom Hoagie, JJ Spawn, Matt Wallace. So really a big emphasis here on Keith Mitchell. I don't like saying that, but third in both off the tee and approach in the past 3 months. He just doesn't putt worth a damn. Honorable mentions here probably to Chan Kim, Tom Hoagie, I guess, Luke Clanton, 1st and 13th. So real big emphasis on ball striking this week. And then we don't want to ignore it, although I don't think putting is going to be that big of a deal. Again, these greens aren't complicated. They're pretty easy to putt on, at least for professionals. We will look at bent. We're definitely going to look at fast and lightning. The past couple of years have seen a few lightning rounds start creeping in. So in the past 2 years, on fast and lightning bent greens, your top putters have been JT Poston, Keegan, Aaron Baddeley, Harry Hall, Matt Wallace, Chesson Hadley, Sahith Theegala, Paul Barjon, Austin Cook, Richie Werenski. Again, the emphasis there on fast and lightning bent greens, although I don't know how much we're really going to factor that in this week. The only other thing we'll take a quick look and a big picture view of, again, all 3 of those par 5s play between 590 and 600, at least on the scorecard. So let's get a real quick view of the top par 5 performers in that length. Top par 5 performers from 550 to 600. Billy Horschel, who had a fantastic Open Championship. Tony Finau, Michael Thorbjornsen, JJ Spawn, Keith Mitchell, Bo Hostler, Nick Dunlap, Seamus Power, Marty Doe, Zay Ching Do, and Akshay Bhatia. In this tournament, what unknown players do you like? Similar to players like Lawrence and Brown. I have trouble finding the right ones. On a Sunday night, that's really, I don't mean this as a cop-out. That's really hard for me to say until I start really digging in, and that's why I call this show an initial research. In case, a player like Luke Clanton, I know he's more well known, but he's still an amateur. Player like Clanton pops on some of these on these top 10s. Maybe a player like Martin Trainer, who's he's older, or a Patrick Fishburne. Just players like that. That's why I like doing the initial research, taking a look at that, and then starting tomorrow. No, there's no reason to apologize. It's a reasonable question. It's a legitimate question. For me, it's just too early in the week because I try to get a bigger picture view early and then narrow in, as opposed to on a Saturday or a Sunday just hammering out research. I just kind of want to enjoy the tournament, especially when I have a sweat going like a Russell Henley at the Open. So, I don't mind being a little bit later on a few players than other pundits. I just like to get a grasp of the course and the players in the field, and then start from there. For me, just to give you a peek behind the curtain, if you will, I do the show Sunday night. I'll probably look a little bit after the stream or after the show, and then tomorrow morning, before I post what I do on social media, that's when I start doing my intensive research. When I start looking at the patterns for the past winners and whatnot, that's when I start my heavy research. It's usually on Monday morning. So, but there's a look at your top fives, or top fives. Gosh dang it! There's a look at your top par 5 performers from 550 to 600 in the past 36 rounds. So, like I said, don't mean to cop out on the answer with that, Derek. It's just for me in my process, I won't be able to answer that, and I'd rather give you the I don't know than to bullshit you an answer, because I know I wouldn't have any confidence in it, and there wouldn't be any substance behind it. All right, last thing we usually cover in Fantasy National. Let's go to the tournament history tab, or the strokes gained total page view. Going through your process, I appreciate the compliment, and I'm glad you're able to take something from it, because I know it gets pretty data intensive, but that's just right up my alley. I'm a math nerd, and I love it. But I'm glad you're able to pick something from the show, and come back, show after show, week after week, and jump in chat. That's why I say it at the end of every show. I really do appreciate that you all tune in and watch and take something from it. So, your past performance here at TPC Twin Cities is pretty mixed in terms of predictability and success. So Tony Finau has played extremely well here. The win 2 years ago, top 5, top 10, another top 25. You see the strokes gained total. I mean, he is miles ahead of everybody else in the field this week in terms of strokes gained total at TPC Twin Cities. Having said that, he's generally one of the strongest players in the field every week at the 3M. So you could maybe realistically expect that. But he has still played very, very well here. Emiliano Grillo played very well here. A runner-up, a top 5, a top 10. He's played well. Cam Davis has played well. Our defending champions, Lee Hodges. He also top 20 his first year. Poston has played well. Adam Long's played well here. Hadwin. Garnett is 5 for 5. Maybe lacking the upper finishes, the elite finishes like a Finau and a Grillo, but he is still 5 for 5 here. Hoagie, Gim. But take a look at what all of these players generally do well. Yeah, that's the way I look at and see it, Barbarian. Data intensive research sees patterns, and that's what I am generally, pretty good at. Just to be honest. In my former life, when I worked at an insurance company, I was a data person. So I've spent a lot of years in adulthood looking at data, lots and lots of data. So that's just what I'm trained in. But let's take a look at these players. These players who have consistently played well here at TPC Twin Cities. Tony Finau. Yes, he's a bomber. He's just a good ball striker. Emiliano Grillo, great ball striker. Cameron Davis is long, but generally is pretty good off the tee and decent with the irons. Poston, not necessarily long, but good irons. Hoagie, fantastic irons. Doug Gim, fantastic irons. You're seeing a pattern of these players who, year over year, have played extremely well at TPC Twin Cities. You'll also note Finau, not a good putter, generally speaking. Grillo, generally speaking, not a good putter. Cam Davis is not a good putter. Poston's a bit of an exception. He's a pretty good putter. Hoagie, not a good putter. Doug Gim, not a good putter. Finau is overcomer? I mean, maybe. He coming off the miscut from the Open Championship. He might be more well rested than the others, but generally speaking, here at TPC Twin Cities, putting is not necessary. Being a good putter is not necessary because these greens aren't complicated. And we see that in the players that have generally played well here. Finau, Grillo, all those players that I mentioned. Hadwin and Poston, maybe a little bit of an exception. They are good putters, but they're generally just good on bent, which is what these are. The other side of that coin, players who have not played well here at TPC Twin Cities. Martin Trainer, 1 for 5. Will Gordon. Austin Cook, 1 for 5. Let's get some more well-known players. Michael Kim, 1 for 4. Matthew Neesmith, 1 for 4. Charlie Hoffman, 0 for 3. Nate Lashley, 1 for 4. Sahith. Look at Sahith Tagala. If you're a big believer in course history, Sahith Tagala is 0 for 3 here. Not particularly played very well. You have to imagine he's going to be one of the higher priced players in the field this week and probably fairly popular. At least early on this week, there's a big reason to avoid him. How much course history matters? I have my doubts, but somebody's routinely showed you that he doesn't like a course. Probably a decent enough reason to at least be cautious about it. But there's a look at the players who have traditionally played well year over year at TPC Twin Cities. And that is a good segue as we move to Microsoft Excel for the evening. The early look file. Again, this is that same page view we just looked at, that strokes gained total page view, just brought over and split out into where these strokes gained are going. So in 2 years, Lee Hodges has averaged a 9th place finish, first and a 16th, comes to 9th, rounded. He has gained 9. He's averaged 9 on approach in those 2 years. I mean, just video game numbers there. So this is where that is. You see Tony Finau, 5 for 5, average finish of 12th. He's gained a bunch on approach. He's actually putt well here, etc. So let's remove the players who have only played it once. I want to see players who consistently, or at least have played here multiple years. What are they doing well? We'll go down to the players who have averaged a top 40. Yeah, this is 21 players. That's plenty enough of a decent sample size. You see, off the tee, only a couple players negative in off the tee. Like, players are going to have to be pretty good off the tee with all the water in play. Even if you don't have the distance, even if you are just fairway finding, you're going to need some amount of distance here. It's not necessarily mandatory. See a few players negative over here in distance. But I do think off the tee, in general terms, is going to be pretty strong this week. Iron play, no doubt about it. I mean, look at Lee Hodges and Tony Finau and Kevin Streelman, although it's only 2 years. I mean, even Poston has gained 3 on average each year. Cam Davis has gained 3 on approach each year. Like, there's a lot there in the approach. This is an average of a 2.2, pretty high. Off the tee, it's an average of a 1.5. Around the green, not so much. Like, Baddeley, that's kind of his game. You see, he's a short game player, around the green putting. Snedeker, kind of his deal. So there might be some decent numbers in here, but look how heavy this green is, and it's only a 3. So don't get don't get caught up in that. Look at the numbers as opposed to the shading. This is a 3 versus a 9, a 5, a 5.5, 5. So it's much more in the ball striking. But the around the green here, this is a 0.7, so it's half of the off the tee, and we saw that in the graphs in the course breakdown. And then putting, this is a 1.6. So players who generally putt well here, I have my doubts that it's going to be a big factor. Again, like I said, Tony Finau, traditionally not a very good putter. He's putt well here. These greens just aren't difficult to putt. Moving to distance and fairways and greens. Distance, it's a little bit of something, I suppose, but I'm more so focused on the off the tee. Just off the tee in general, total. Fairways, it's okay. The 0.9. I think it's either in the good drives or the greens, per usual. 2.6 there. Greens is a 3.1. That's pretty high. But the reason that I'm a little bit suspect of just wanting to look at greens is these greens are easy to hit. So, and that's part of the reason why I kind of like doing my research, get a feel for the course, and then really jump in tomorrow. Moving to scoring. More consistent, again, looks to be the bogeys. The 2.4, but not a single player negative in bogeys. The higher raw numbers appear to be in the birdies gained. There's a 2.1. So the bogeys are actually outweighing it a little bit, but you see the higher raw numbers, 6, 4, 4.5, is in the birdies gained. Par 3s, not a whole lot here, but they've been generally played well by the players that are playing the best around TPC Twin Cities. There's just not a lot here. So this is a 1.2. The par 4s, a 3.3. Par 5s, I know they're off your screen, but the par 5s is a 1.4. What was the point? What was the par 3s? 1.2. Okay. I would have thought the par 5s would have been a little bit higher. In the par 4s, again, we've got a good mix. 2, 4, 3, and 2, at least on the scorecard. I don't know if there's any range as opposed to just maybe just total par 4s. And then par 5s, I mean, most of it's coming into this range. So, like, you look at all the zeros. So, most of the time it's in that 550 to 600. That's why we looked at that range. Last thing I'll look at just very quickly is proximity. Interestingly enough, for the players who have consistently played well here, year over year, there's not a lot in total procs. There's not a lot in the 200 plus at all. At all. This is rather... That's not a lot of correlation at all. So, interesting. At least from a quick look, it'd be the 125 to 150, but we'll take a look at more of that in the Excel portion tomorrow in the data dive. I'll bring everybody back into the field. That's going to do it for the show this evening. Thanks to Derek and Brobarian for jumping in chat. It's much appreciated. I really do appreciate the compliments, and I'm glad you all are able to take something from the show. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel, by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. I love what I do, although it is very data intensive. I love what I do, taking an in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Past 2 weeks have been very, very good. The 4 weeks before that weren't. So we've been pretty good the past couple of weeks. We're going to try to keep the momentum going for the penultimate regular season event on the PGA Tour, the 3M Open in Minnesota. So thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers that you made this past week for the Open Championship and the Barracuda, for all the DFS contests you played this past week and weekend for the Open Championship and the Barracuda. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.